Lifting my card up to the clocking machine and hearing that all too familiar beep confirmed I was confined to my desk for the next 8 hours. Monotonous tasks must be completed on time. Coffee needed to be made for the higher-ups in their oh-so-important meetings that could be shortened down into a well-worded email, and files must be organised, only to have some ignorant fat cat barge in, ruin the filing system, looking for something of great importance, and leave me to tidy up the mess. I hated my job, but it paid my bills and provided me with just enough left over to fuel my body. I never planned this. I'd hoped to join the Air Force and one day become a pilot, the first female service person in my family. My uncle, grandfather, and their fathers before them, they had all enlisted, and I wanted to continue the tradition. However, my body was not on my side. I wore glasses, and I knew my eyesight was going to get worse, but my young, naive mind did not factor in that pilots needed very good eyesight. That was my dream out the window, and I didn't have a backup plan for this. I just assumed I would be okay. So, with no impressive qualifications under my belt, I applied for any and every job I could find. Rejection after rejection came flooding in, but eventually I landed a job in admin for some stationery supply company. Not great pay, and the tasks were arbitrary, in my opinion. But the pay kept coming, so I remained stable. I eventually saved up enough to afford the rent and a little studio apartment and keep my beat up old banger of a car running. It wasn't an ideal life, but it would do until I could plan my next move. While I would look on at these self-entitled white males barking orders at us peasants, I knew one day I could achieve great things. I just needed a sign, and that sign came in the form of a book. I love to read, and have done, so for as long as I can remember. My father often joked my hands would end up fusing to the paper of the latest novel I was engrossed in, as I would never put it down once it had my attention. Fast forward to the age of technological dependency, and I still refuse to upgrade. Don't get me wrong, the idea of being able to store thousands of books on one device was a great convenience, but I am terrible with technology and frequently forget to recharge my phone, so being unable to enjoy my latest read due to a lack of battery power would drive me insane. I also love the look and feel of books, and adorned my little apartment with shelves full of books, all in various shapes, size, and colours. Friday came around, and I eagerly watched the time tick away, edging closer and closer to the time I would abandon this place for a couple of days, and forget about making a strong black coffee, sweet cheeks, or responding to emails on the latest colour scheme for our executive stationery range. Every Friday since I started here, I would venture over to the Bailey and Banks bookstore, which was just a few minutes walk from my office. It was my little treat, a well done to myself for surviving another week in that admin hellhole. I would always be greeted by the young man who worked on the counter. I guess he had started to recognise me for my frequent visits. Everything about him screamed hipster. His ugly beard, which desperately needed trimming, slicked back hair similar to the greasers of yesteryear, thick-rimmed glasses in similar style to the Buddy Holly, and clothes which really belonged back in the charity shop. But I'm not one to judge. I hadn't bought a brand new item of clothing since we got a corporate bonus back in 2011. In case you're wondering, I treated myself to a pair of shoes, which actually cost more than my entire outfit that day. As usual, I walked into the little store, heard the familiar bell signal my arrival, and waved back at the greasy hipster who was sipping a cup of dirty-looking tea and reading the blurb of a new novel you won't have heard of. Aside from myself, the only other people in the store were the little old lady who owned the store. She was in the office, busily sorting through stacks of papers. An old man pursuing the crime novel section, and a couple of nerdy-looking school kids checking out the YA literature section. Every time I visit, I try a different genre. This time, I was scheduled to check out the horror fantasy section. I'd read the classic writings of Stephen King, E.A.P. and H.P. Lovecraft, so it was time for something new. Nothing particularly stood out, so I was just lazily running my finger along the spines, trying to decide, when I spotted a small, beaten-up book tucked next to a copy of Stephen King's It. It seemed out of place amongst the new, or fairly new books, which surrounded it, and I slid it out from the shelf to get a closer look. The book was bound with what seemed like red-stained leather, and embossed with shiny gold writing. The words, "The Devil's Cookbook," adorned the front. Immediately, I was intrigued. I do enjoy supernatural horrors, and assumed this would be the same. There was no information on the blurb as to what was inside. When I opened it up, it looked like a recipe book. Figures, I assumed it was maybe a Halloween-themed cookbook. And seeing as I had no plans for the night, I thought it seemed like a good idea. I paid for the little book without hassle and returned home. After kicking off my heels and trading in my uncomfortable office attire for a t-shirt and some shorts, I poured myself a drink and put on some music. I had very few friends, so Fridays were often spent alone, which I didn't mind. I spent all week in an office full of people. Being away from others did me some good once in a while. I pulled the little red book out of my bag and pondered for a moment, running my finger along the gold embossed lettering. Why did this book interest me? Sure, I like horror and did like to cook, but why did I pick it up? I couldn't fully explain it. I was just drawn to it. Before I could think about it further, I was turning over the first page and opening the book. This definitely wasn't an ordinary cookbook. Inside was a plethora of recipes, concoctions, spells, even to create different disastrous elixirs. It was fascinating, if not a little morbid. The ingredients list for some of these recipes required herbs and fungi I had never even heard of, and aimed to cause a variety of ill effects on the consumer: nausea, vomiting, loss of vision, coma, death. The book claimed each potion would not be detectable in the victim, and cause of death would be attributed to other natural causes. I can understand how that would be possible. I chuckled to myself, joking that maybe the devil was on my side, should I ever use these recipes. While this little book continued to intrigue, I had no real use for it. I filed it in alongside my other horror novels, and all but forgot about its contents. The weeks passed in a flurry of boredom and stress, and nothing of great importance occurred. The little red book was almost forgotten, gathering dust on my shelf, until one day at work, when I almost lost it. I was busy typing up some minutes from a meeting on paper quality I was forced to attend. I was just about ready to finish it, when one of the project managers, let's call him Darren, came storming over to my desk. He was holding a coffee in one hand and a contract file in the other. Mandy, Mary, whatever your name is, this file is missing the terms and conditions amendments for this quarter. He was accusing me, it seemed, even though I know I added the amendments to it. There must be a mistake. I just added the amendment print last week, I replied. He was getting more flushed. Don't backchat me. It's not there now, and your job was to add it. I have a meeting in 5 minutes, and if I don't see the amendments in there by that time, your job is at risk. Assholes. How dare he speak down to me like that? I flicked through the file and saw it was in there, clear as day. But his stupid, self-entitled cloud of arrogance failed to notice this. I sarcastically added a big sticky note with, "It was in here all along," slid the file to the corner of my desk, and continued typing up the email response to a customer complaint relayed from management. Darren came stomping back over, grabbed the file, and looked amusingly embarrassed by his ignorance. I smiled, trying to stifle a laugh, but he spotted me. "Do you think it's funny to mess with corporate files?" "Sir, they were already in there. I haven't messed with anything." "I know what I saw. They weren't there." His shouting caused the rest of the office to turn to me, my face flushed with embarrassment. I refused to speak back to him, letting him feel like he won. Well, he certainly won this battle, but he wouldn't win the war. In that moment, the little red book came to my mind. Surely it wouldn't work. At worst, he might get a tummy ache. As if some unknown force was commanding me, I raced home after work, grabbed the book off the shelf, and browsed the selections of poisons on offer. Eventually, I settled on what was called Fundissa, which I discovered means purge and finish. It was claimed to cause violent expulsions from the stomach. Either end was fine by me, so I read the ingredients list, and everything seemed straightforward. A pinch of nutmeg, some distilled water, lace fly wings. Luckily, I often saw a few of these on my porch light. But the last ingredient stumped me. It was a fungus called Venomum horribilis. A quick online translation meant it translated to horrible poison, which I couldn't find anywhere online. The name seemed made up, and I tried to search for images of this. After spending what felt like hours online, I decided to try my luck at a bit of foraging. My apartment complex backed onto a patch of woodland, and I had seen fungus growing in their dampened, moist-covered area. I had the image in the book as my only reference, so I had to get this right, or risk murdering the project manager. I didn't want to kill him, just cause him to have an upset stomach, which would give him some level of discomfort he had caused me. I donned my waterproof jacket and Wellington boots, and set off with the Devil's Cookbook and a little flashlight. The fading light and drizzly conditions would make an interesting trip. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I wear glasses. My vision is not great. I add to this some poor lighting conditions. Now I top it off with a crudely drawn colour image of a mushroom-like fungus. I had no chance of finding it, in all honesty. I had to hope for the best that colour wasn't the key factor in finding this little fungus. I turned on the little torch as I neared the edges of the wooded area, hoping on finding the required ingredient. Even if it was a very optimistic stab in the dark. I had no idea if it was a native fungus or not, nor did I know if it grew in this specific area. While I wandered around, totally lost and feeling like someone was going to happen across this stumbling idiot in the dark, I got a feeling I was close. Call it intuition or some gilding force. But, as luck would have it, I found an identical match to the drawing. Same umbrella-shaped body, with dark colour micella underneath and oozing spots on the surface. I put on the latex gloves I bought with me and collected a sampling of these little mushrooms and ran home. Now I had all the ingredients. It was a matter of following the instructions. Whoever wrote these must have thought I was a 5-year-old, as everything was written out in a patronising tone. Cut the mushroom up finely, like big grains of wheat, but do not squash it. Pinch the nutmeg in between your thumb and forefinger and sprinkle into the pot. Turn up the heat so the flames are as big as they will go. Was this a children's guide to satanic recipes? I must have missed that class in school. After chopping, boiling, straining and blending as the guide instructed, I was left with a mixture that looked like vomit. How the hell was I going to get Darren to eat this? Even my old dog Bonnie, who frequently ate her own feces, would turn her nose up at this. I read the final notes, which described the delivery of the concoction. Turns out this mixture could dissolve in boiling water, suggesting that it is administered in tea. Lucky for me, Darren was rarely ever seen without a cup of coffee in his fat hands. All that was left to do was slip this into his morning coffee I regularly made and let the expulsions commence. I turned up to work on Monday with the bile-resembling elixir in a water bottle, hidden deep within my handbag. Our personal effects were searched on our way home. Who would want to steal second-rate office supplies? But not on the way in, so I had to dispose of the bottle by the end of the working day. The recipe claimed 3 drops was enough, but the batch made about 100 millilitres. No mention of best before dates, but surely it couldn't get mouldy, could it? Its main ingredient was fungus. I sat at my desk, trying to disguise the guilt building up in my stomach. I'd read the recipe again and again. It said the effects were violent expulsions from the stomach, but no mention of death. It should be fine, just a spot of sickness or diarrhea, and he'd be back to normal after some embarrassment. He slammed his mug down on my tray as usual and went into his office, waiting my delivery. And boy, would it be a delivery. I made up his coffee as normal, but as I added the instant mixture to his mug, I dropped 3 drops of the fungus liquid in it. Adding water, sugar, and milk managed to disguise the strange, grassy smell emanating from the potion itself. I couldn't see it having an adverse effect on the taste. No, I didn't sample it, in case you were wondering. I knocked on Darren's door, dropping his mug off while he was complaining down the phone at someone, and quickly exited the room, awaiting the storm. I was busy entering some data into a spreadsheet for one of the accounts managers, when all of a sudden, Darren burst out of his office, clasping his chubby hand over his mouth. Here we go, I thought. The show is about to begin. He was straining to breathe as he gagged and retched, urgently trying to relay what was happening to him. People were flustered as they swarmed him trying to help him, but to no avail. I was trying not to smile, but seeing him suffer was making me a lot happier than it ought to. I felt powerful, in control, better than he was. I braced myself for some violent expulsions when I got more than I bargained for. He could barely keep his balance, swaying to and fro and crashing into various desks and shelves, causing destruction in his wake. His face flushed and his eyes bulged, a voice becoming raspy whisper. He tried drinking water, which shot straight back out of his mouth. He pushed people aside, knocking one woman into the corner of a filing cabinet, splitting her head open, and blood trickling down her face. Darren dropped onto all fours and projectile vomited a mixture of blood and coffee everywhere. I knew it was blood from the consistency and dark red hues coating the carpet, walls, and nearby helpful colleagues. Whatever contents were inside his stomach soon re-emerged over the grey office carpeting. People could only watch on in horror from a distance as their work, desks, and possessions were smeared in an acidic, viscous liquid. However, my amusement soon turned to horror. Obviously in great pain, Darren suddenly changed from a panic-stricken, ill man to a zombie-like being devoid of emotion. I can truly explain it. He just suddenly stopped struggling, staring straight ahead. When anyone tried to approach him and help him, he pushed them aside. Without missing a beat, he took his hand, clasped his own throat, and tore through his skin with uncomfortable strength. His nails dug deeper, his knuckles turned white from the strength he was exerting, and he swiftly pulled tissue away from his throat. Blood spurted out from his neck, and gooey, acidic fluid spilled out from what remained of his esophagus. With a loud crash, he collapsed on the ground, his bodily fluids draining out from his wounds, and he slipped away. He was dead, and I killed him, and it felt good. This was it, my sign. I had power to eliminate anyone who stood in my way. At my fingertips. All it took was a little cookery and a little trickery. I could do it now. I could achieve greatness. I could become something far beyond what I imagined. Ambulance crews arrived shortly after Darren's suicide, frantic trying to stem the bleeding and resuscitate him. But he was already gone, his eyes devoid of life and his blood soaking the carpet in a sticky blanket of red. People around me were crying, hugging one another, or frozen and slack-jawed. I wasn't. I simply sat, observing and enjoying what I had done. Ever since that day, I've had nothing but success. Darren's position required filling temporarily while they sourced permanent placement. They interviewed a few of us, myself included. Lucky for me, I soon wiped out the competition, as on the day of the interviews, I was the only available applicant, seeing as the other two had fallen mysteriously ill. Pity. I was succeeding so well on a temporary basis, they gave me the permanent contract for me. I was now raking in enough to leave that shit heap of an apartment and buy my first ever house. A new car and new clothes for the first time. I even got a little kitten called Max. Heartbreak is also never an issue. For anyone that hurts me soon gets hurt, and much more. No matter who you are, if you do anything to hamper my progress or stop my success, well, you saw what happened to Darren. I spent years searching for a way to improve my life. But lucky for me, the devil found me and left me his little cookbook. I started out my career wanting to be a pilot. I finished my career as a chef. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.